देश के बाहर का आदमी, अमेरिकन हिस्टोरियन विल डुरांट, बहुत बड़े हिस्टोरियन हैं, हम सब इज्जत से उनका नाम लेते हैं, उन्होंने अपनी किताब में साफ साफ लिखा हुआ है कि इस्लामिक इन्वेजन ऑफ इंडिया इज द ब्लडीएस्ट चैप्टर ऑफ ह्यूमन हिस्ट्री। इंडियन हिस्ट्री की बात नहीं हो रही है, ह्यूमन हिस्ट्री की बात हो रही है। कोट कर रहा हूं कि भारत में मुसलमानों का अत्याचार इतना भयानक रहा है कि सारे संसार के इतिहास में उसका कोई जोड़ नहीं है।
This Mongol empire expansion for a period of 90 years to 100 years killed over 40 million people. 40 million people. Of those times, it was nearly 10% of the world's population.
Hindus living with Jews, no problem. Baha'is living with Jews, no problem. Jews living with atheists, no problem. Sikhs living with Hindus, no problem. Hindus living with Baha'is, no problem. Christians living with Jews, no problem. Muslims living with Jews, problem. Muslims living with Sikhs, problem. Muslims living with Hindus, problem. Muslims living with Baha'is, problem. Muslims living with Muslims, very big problem. So this led to, they're not happy in Gaza, they're not happy in Egypt, they're not happy in Libya, they're not happy in Iran, they're not happy in Iraq, they're not happy in Yemen, they're not happy in Pakistan, they're not happy in Syria, they're not happy in Lebanon, they're not happy in Nigeria, they're not happy in Kenya, they're not happy in Sudan, they're not happy in Morocco, and they're not happy in Afghanistan. So where are they happy? They're happy in Australia, they're happy in Belgium, they're happy in France, they're happy in Holland, they're happy in Italy, they're happy in Germany, they're happy in Spain, they're happy in Sweden, they're happy in Denmark, they're happy in the USA and Canada, they're happy in Norway and India, they're very happy in England, loads of welfare benefits, they're happy in almost every country that is not Islamic. And who do they blame? Not Islam, not their leadership, not themselves. They blame the countries they are happy in, and they want to change the countries they're happy in to be like the countries they came from where they were unhappy. This video is not limited to any one religion, but the following is true. The shoe bomber was a Muslim. The Beltway snipers were Muslims. The Fort Hood shooter was a Muslim. The underwear bomber was a Muslim. The USS Cole bombers were Muslims. The Madrid train bombers were Muslims. The Bali nightclub bombers were Muslims. The London subway bombers were Muslims. The Moscow theater attackers were Muslims. The Boston Marathon bombers were Muslims. The Pan Am Flight number 93 bombers were Muslims. The Air France Entebbe hijackers were Muslims. The Iranian embassy takeover was by Muslims. The Beirut U.S. Embassy bombers were Muslims. The Libyan U.S. Embassy attack was by Muslims. The Buenos Aires suicide bombers were Muslims. The Israeli Olympic team attackers were Muslims. The Kenyan U.S. Embassy bombers were Muslims. The Saudi Khobar Towers bombers were Muslims. The Beirut Marine Barracks bombers were Muslims. The Beshan Russian school attackers were Muslims. The First World Trade Center bombers were Muslims. The Bombay Mumbai India attackers were Muslims. The Achille Lauro cruise ship hijackers were Muslims. The Nairobi, Kenya shopping mall killers were Muslims. The September 11th, 2001 airline hijackers were Muslims. The Sydney, Australia Lint Cafe kidnapper was a Muslim. The Peshawar Pakistani school children killers were Muslims. Think of it.
إنا مضحون بعملاء الصليب.
أتينا نملأ الآفاق رعبا نصب النار فوق الهام صبا نذيق الكافرين حميم سيف وقصف قذائف ينهال شهبا أتينا نملأ الآفاق رعبا.
I am holding in my hand the Muslim Brotherhood plan for the destruction of the United States, written 5/22/1991. They talk about the settlement in the United States, understanding the role of the Muslim Brother in North America. The process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan, which is the Arabic word for brothers, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. Is this clear? They don't mince words, do they? But the most important page of this document is the last page. Because in the last page, they list 29 front Islamic organizations set up in the United States with the specific goal of sabotaging America from within and destroying America by our own hands.
I am a member of the minority Hindu community from Kashmir, victim of the worst ethnic cleansing witnessed in independent India. I speak here today because I am a survivor. An innocent young woman, a lab assistant in a school, wasn't as lucky as I was. She was abducted, blindfolded, gang raped, and cut into two halves on a mechanical saw while still alive. Her name was Girija Tikku. Her only crime, her faith. I am her voice today. I am also the voice of young Kashmiri Hindu engineer who was hunted by terrorists, again for his faith. When terrorists came to kill him, he hid inside a rice container in his attic, and he would have been alive today had his location not been disclosed to the terrorists by his own neighbors. His neighbors he trusted, neighbors that we trusted. The terrorists shot him through the container and forced his wife to eat the blood-soaked rice. His name was B.K. Ganju. His crime, his faith. I speak for him today. We have seen ISIS level of horror and brutality in Kashmir 30 years before the West was even introduced to the brutalities of radical Islamic terror. Where were the advocates of human rights when my rights were taken away? Where were they on the night of 19th January 1990 when there were voices blaring from all mosques in Kashmir that they wanted Kashmir with Hindu women but without Hindu men? Where were the saviors of humanity when my feeble old grandfather stood with 2 kitchen knives and an old rusted axe ready to kill my mother and I in order to save us from the much worse fate that awaited us if we landed in the hands of terrorists on the same fateful night? My people were given 3 choices: flee, convert, or die. Around 400,000 Kashmiri Hindus fled right after that night of horror. They survived. Those who didn't were killed.
अभी हाल में पता चला कश्मीर देश के कम से कम 500 जगहों पर पनप रहा है।
1989 में वीपी सिंह की सरकार में भारत का पहला मुसलमान गृह मंत्री बना 8 दिसंबर 1989 को 89 को। उस आदमी का नाम था मुफ्ती मोहम्मद सईद। 8 दिसंबर को बनता है और 8 दिसंबर को और 19 जनवरी के बीच में भी महीना भी पूरा नहीं हुआ था और 19 जनवरी को पूरे कश्मीर के अंदर से 5.5 लाख कश्मीरी हिंदू पंडितों को मार के, रेप करके, बच्चों को उछाल उछाल के मारा है। टीपालाल टकरू उनके सबसे बड़े इंटेलेक्चुअल थे, बहुत बड़े थे। उनका जब सड़क पे मर्डर किया गया तो मोटरसाइकिल घुमा रहे थे उसके पीछे चारों तरफ और कह रहे थे कि किसी ने इस काफिर को पानी दिया तो उसको भी हम नहीं छोड़ेंगे।
2027 तक एक हिंदू नहीं नजर आने लगा, एक हिंदू नहीं नजर आने लगा, एक मंदिर नहीं नजर आने लगा, एक मंदिर नहीं नजर आने लगा।
King, yet they were able to come to Lebanon, use our open-mindedness, our fairness, our tolerance, our multiculturalism, and our democracy to topple our democracy. My 9/11 happened to me in 1975. When radical Muslims blew up my home, bringing it down, burying me under the rubble wounded, as they shouted Allahu Akbar. My only crime was that I was a Christian living in a Christian town.
We seem to be looking at millions of rapes of white and Sikh girls by Muslim men.
बोतल लिया, खाली बोतल भी रखी है।
What is the reason for this? Different ideas and separatism. Then I found very reason is Quran. I am not criticizing Quran, but I am revealing the truth. Let me quote certain pages of Quran. Allah will shed human blood while angels praise him in heaven. Surah number 2 Al-Baqarah. Again, kill disbelievers wherever you find them. But if they desist in their unbelief, then don't kill them. Surah Al-Baqarah. Attack on the necks of the disbelievers. Whenever you fight against them, those who die fighting for Allah will be rewarded. Surah Muhammad, number 47. Lastly, I just quote this line. If you refuse to fight for Allah, He will punish you with the painful doom. Al-Fath, number 48. If this is the teaching in this holy book, how can it be implemented to achieve peace and harmony and unity in this society? Dear friends, please enlighten us if we are wrong, and let us enlighten you if you are wrong.
कुरान तो खुद कहता है कि तुम टेररिस्ट बनो। कुरान का हुक्म है। मसलन कौन सी आयत? अल्लाह के दुश्मनों के खिलाफ टेररिस्ट बनने का हुक्म कुरान हमें कहता है
कि जहां भी आप काफिरों को पाओ वहां उनका कत्ल करो। और जब आप कुरान मजीद खोलेंगे और देखेंगे सूरह तौबा सूरा नंबर 9 आयत नंबर 5, उसमें बराबर यही लिखा है कि जहां भी आप काफिरों को पाओ वहां उनका कत्ल।
कुरान के अंदर कुछ आयतें ऐसी हैं जो आतंक को बढ़ावा देती हैं, वायलेंस टीचिंग हम कहें उसको एक तरह से, वो कुरान के अंदर इस तरह की बातें हैं।
I have decided to fight Islam. Please pay attention to my statement. To fight Islam, not the political Islam, not the militant Islam, not the radical Islam, not the Wahhabi Islam, but Islam itself. Islam is the problem, but no one is stating the truth. No one is taking a hard look at the root of the terrorism, which is the brainwashing machine called Islam.
Step around the corner of this suburban London street and the windows on the building and the plaque on the door will reveal that this is in fact a mosque, and it's a mosque that's in a bit of trouble right now for hiring a dangerous extremist to teach children and then trying to cover it up. 26-year-old Umar Haq taught Islamic studies at the mosque, despite having no qualifications and being employed as an administrator. Umar Haq was jailed for life. During the trial, the court heard details of how he'd shown extremist materials to children that had attended the after-school club here, and how he tried to mould them into an army of kids.
شهداؤنا وهبوا الحياة رخيص أرض الهدى ونقدم الأرواح دون تواني وسنضرب الآناق عن أجسادهم ونحرر الأقصى الحزين العاري ونقود جيش الله منجز وعسى.
But there are some people in the world who decide not to use the intellect. They are happy worshipping idols. They worship the cows. It's the Hindus, isn't it? Like the Hindus, they worship the cows.
This is how he describes Hindu religious practices.
If we choose to worship such ridiculous things, our cows. Now, how can anyone Believers, they are the worst of all the creatures.
And what they're told about other Muslims.
A person who's got less than a fistful beard, then you should stay away from him the same way you stay away from a serpent or a snake.
He puts a question to the children about Hindus and other idol worshippers.
Do they have any intellects? No. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
There are at least 2,000 madrasas in the UK, teaching more than 100,000 children how to recite the Quran. Children with non-Muslim haircuts are sent to stand against the wall. The senior teacher says looking like non-Muslims is forbidden. He uses the word kafar, an often derogatory term meaning disbeliever or infidel.
You need to free yourself from the influence of the shaitan and the society. Yeah? The kuffar have brought so many new things out, and you need to free yourself from slavery. What kind of slavery am I talking about?
But in this assembly, the teacher tells the boys they should hate the sinful nature of non-Muslim society.
What did you think about the repeated use of kafar?
Never would a kafir enter Jannah until a camel enters the eye of a needle.
It's like the N-word. It's a term of abuse, a term of censure, condemnation.
Some of the teachings that we've shown you, do you think they could be described as hate teachings?
There's no shadow of doubt. When you teach children that they should be intolerant of other faiths, have no respect for them, you are breeding hostility, antipathy, and animosity to others. If that's not hate, what is hate?
Madrasas can be set up in mosques, community centres, or private homes. There's no national body that registers and inspects them.
बिजनौर के एक मदरसा में अवैध हथियार बरामद होने के बाद यूपी के कई शहरों में कल हिंदू जागरण मंच ने प्रदर्शन किया। हिंदू जागरण मंच के कार्यकर्ताओं ने मदरसों की तत्काल जांच की मांग की।
बिजनौर के शेरकोट में मदरसा दारुल कुरान हमीदिया से कुछ दिन पहले अवैध हथियारों की बरामदगी का ये साइड इफेक्ट है।
ये जो दहशतगर्दी इस वक्त मुसलमानों की तरफ से हो रही है, इसका सबब वो मजहबी फिक्र और रिलीजियस थॉट है जो मुसलमानों के मदरसों में पढ़ाया जा रहा है, जो उनकी सियासी तहरीकों में सिखाया जा रहा है। इसका बायस ये है, और इसमें 4 चीजें हर मदरसा पढ़ाता है, हर मजहबी मुफक्किर सिखाता है। वो आपके सामने ना सिखाए तो बहरहाल लाजमन सिखाता है। वो 4 चीजें क्या हैं वो सुन लीजिए। पहली चीज ये है कि दुनिया में अगर कहीं शिर्क होगा या किसी जगह कुफ्र होगा या इर्तदाद होगा, एपोस्टेसी, यानी कोई शख्स इस्लाम छोड़ देगा, तो उसकी सजा मौत है और ये सजा हमें नाफिज करने का हक है। पहली बात। दूसरी बात ये सिखाई जाती है कि दुनिया में गैर मुस्लिम सिर्फ महकूम होने के लिए पैदा किए गए हैं। मुसलमानों के सिवा किसी को दुनिया पर हुकूमत का हक नहीं है। गैर मुस्लिमों की हर हुकूमत एक नाजायज हुकूमत है। जब हमारे पास ताकत होगी हम उसको उलट देंगे। तीसरी चीज जो हर जगह सिखाई जाती है वो ये है कि दुनिया में मुसलमानों की एक ही हुकूमत होनी चाहिए जिसको खिलाफत कहते हैं। ये अलग अलग हुकूमतें, इनका कोई जवाज नहीं है। और चौथी बात यह कि जदीद नेशन स्टेट, ये जो कौमी रियासत है, ये एक कुफ्र है जिसकी इस्लाम में कोई गुंजाइश नहीं है। ये 4 बातें हमारे मजहबी फिक्र की बुनियाद हैं। मुझे ये बताइए कि अगर ये आपको सिखा दी जाए तो आप क्या करेंगे?
Yet the population of Europe is not declining. Why? Islamic immigration. France, 1.8 children per family. Muslims, 8.1. In just 39 years, France will be an Islamic republic. Muammar al-Gaddafi of Libya said, "There are signs that Allah will grant victory to Islam in Europe, without swords, without guns, without conquest. We don't need terrorists. We don't need homicide bombers. The 50+ million Muslims in Europe will turn it into a Muslim continent within a few decades."
Education is one of the most important areas that Muslims have to address. And while our final objective is not just to become part of the system that we experience now and that we see, our final objective is to create our own Islamic systems, and not only create Islamic systems for Muslims, but to look at all the other people who are sharing this country with us as potential Muslims.
And the enemies of mankind. Ahmed Musa Jibril, an American, but one of the most popular online voices among Brits who go to fight with so-called Islamic State. I'm telling you fact, he calls for jihad and preaches separation of Muslims from non-Muslims, or kuffar.
Hours ago, masses of the Ummah, our Ummah, were joining with the kuffar in their New Year's celebration.
A former friend of London attacker Khurram Butt says it was Jibril's videos that helped radicalize him.
I've been to New York a couple of times before 9/11, and even to the Bible Belt, I think they call it the Midwest. And, it's about propagating Islam. I do believe that the Muslims in America are possibly 5 or 10 years behind in terms of the struggle that they're engaging in.
So would you like to see Sharia law in Canada replace Canadian law?
At some point it will. Because we have families, we are making babies. You're not. Your population is going down the slump, right? And by 2060, according to Pew Research Institute, your research, by 2060, Muslims will be the biggest religious group the world over. What are you going to do then?
आपने फरमाया अगर काफिरों से ताल्लुक जरूरी भी है ना, तो बस इतना ही है जैसे लैट्रीन के अंदर जाना मजबूरी है।
अहले ईमान न बनाए अपने दोस्त काफिरों को।
मुस्लिम से दोस्ती करना ये मना है
कि काफिरों से दोस्ती और मोहब्बत नहीं होंगी।
आपके धर्म के खिलाफ बोलने वाले का आप गला काट देंगे, आप यही कह रहे हैं?
धर्म के खिलाफ बोलने वाले का मैं गला काट दूंगा, मैं कह रहा हूँ।
Her website praised Osama bin Laden.
Most Muslims love Osama like I love him myself.
ये मत समझना कि हिंदुस्तान के मुसलमानों से रोहिंग्या का मुसलमान अलग है। दुनिया में मुसलमान कहीं भी हो, हम सब आपस में भाई हैं।
अगर हमारे नौजवान बच्चों को हमने एक दफा इशारा कर दिया और उकसा दिया, तो हमारे बच्चे उनसे कई ज्यादा ताकत रखते हैं। वो अकेला पाके
अगर 5 करोड़ मुसलमान ये अहद कर लें कि हमको एक साल में 5 गैर मुस्लिमों को इस्लाम पेश करके मुसलमान बनाना है, कोशिश करके जिद्दोजहद करके माल देकर कैसे भी हिकमत से, तो आप बतलाएं कि एक साल में कितने करोड़ हिंदू मुसलमान होंगे?
हिंदुस्तान की मुस्लिम लीग और असदुद्दीन अवैसी को चाहिए हिंदुस्तान के अंदर पार्टीशन की एक नई तहरीक को चलाया जाए, हिंदुस्तान की धरती से एक नया मुस्लिम वतन निकले। ये वक्त की भी जरूरत है और हमारे मुसलमान हुक्मरानों को भी चाहिए।
आप अगर कोई प्रोटेस्ट करते हैं तो पता इसका फायदा क्या होता है? बाहर की जो इन्वेस्टर होते हैं, जो कंपनी होती है, तो हर दिन वो अपना पैसा लगाती है इंडियन शेयर मार्केट में, लेकिन जब देखता है कि लोग वहां पर प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं तो वो पैसा नहीं लगाते, तो हिंदुस्तान की मार्केट डाउन होती है। 2 आदमी
इन सब के पास उनकी अपनी बनी हुई तलवारें मौजूद हैं। एक बार कटें इनको है, बहुत अच्छे। हाँ तू भी काट देखा। वाह वाह वाह, तू शाबाश।
हम मुसलमान हैं और हमें काफिर की गर्दनें उड़ानी है।
ओ अच्छा, काफिरों की गर्दनें उड़ानी है। मतलब कोई भी काफिर मिल गया तो आप लोगों ने उसका वो सर कलम कर देना है।
What makes a terrorist? Poverty? Illiteracy? Watch this video to find out. Everybody says poverty and illiteracy fuel terrorism. that the underprivileged are easily misled into killing others in the name of religion. Is it true? Let's check. There were 9 suicide bombers in the April 21 Colombo attack, mostly well-educated and from wealthy families. 8 have been identified and one of them was a woman. One of the attackers was Abdul Latif Jamil Muhammad, who studied aerospace engineering at Kingston University in London from 2006 to 2007. He went on to study his postgraduate degree in Australia before leaving in 2013 to return to Sri Lanka. 2 of the bombers were brothers, the sons of one of Sri Lanka's wealthiest spice traders. One, in Shaf Ibrahim, who owned a copper factory, was the one who detonated his explosive device at the busy breakfast buffet of the luxurious Shangri-La Hotel. The other brother, Ilham Ibrahim, detonated his device at the Cinnamon Grand Hotel restaurant. You think Sri Lankan terrorists were exceptions? All those who flew planes into New York's World Trade Center on 9/11 were from affluent backgrounds. Muhammad Atta, for instance, was born to wealthy parents, studied architecture from Cairo University and then urban planning from Germany. 2/3 of 9/11 attackers had degrees. 9/11 mastermind Osama bin Laden was son of a construction tycoon and went on to elite secular school and university. His successor and current Al-Qaeda chief, Ayman al-Zawahiri, is a qualified pediatrician. One plot in Britain in 2007 was almost entirely devised by highly qualified doctors and medical experts. Bangladeshi ISIS terrorists, including Tamim Chaudhry, who killed 20 hostages in upscale Holy Artisan Bakery in Dhaka in 2016, were from wealthy, highly educated backgrounds. The genius of jihad, Anwar al-Awlaki's father, was a Fulbright scholar and doctorate. Awlaki himself did bachelor's in civil engineering from Colorado State University in the US and was working on his doctorate. The Pakistani terrorist and killer of journalist Daniel Pearl, Omar Saeed Sheikh, comes from an extremely wealthy family settled in Britain. He studied in London School of Economics. So, some of the leading lights of terrorism and religious fanaticism come from well-off, highly educated backgrounds. Poverty and illiteracy are not necessarily the fodder for terror. The worst monsters have walked out of posh villas and cool cars to kill and maim hundreds of innocent. Terrorism is a state of mind.
Sadly, my religion in the current situation is an absolute mess. I come from a lineage of Islamic leadership. When I am worried about what's happening and what I see from my community and religion, trust me that there's something going on.
A stunning admission from the Imam of Peace. The president of the Islamic Association of South Australia, Imam Tahidi, is worried, and he's not alone.
There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
People are claiming it is the word of God. They don't have the courage to amend the book. It is time that you take sensible part of people who believe in these books and say, see, if you edit these 10 pages, your book will become wonderful.
Salman Khurshid, you compared Hindutva with terrorist organization ISIS and Boko Haram. You are trying to create a false equivalence to hide the real terrorist. I challenge you to provide only one proof or one link where Hindus have done something similar to Boko Haram or ISIS. Just give me one picture where Hindus have done beheading like ISIS or a Boko Haram. I promise you to give you the list of 40,440 terrorist attacks by a very specific group.
To defend our citizens from the threat of radical Islamic terrorism.
We'll talk about is how we can deal with Islamic terror, and I mean deal with it rather than doing what Theresa May is doing, which is pretending to deal with it. 1, we should stop all Muslim immigration today completely. 2, we should close down every mosque in this country which preaches Salafist or Deobandi Islamic supremacism, which means pretty much all of them. 3, we should tell the truth about Islam, which means identifying all the calls for violence and terror in the Quran, and then ban the Quran as a book of hate. If these suggestions were in place in the future and we still suffered from Islamic terror, then the only and logical response should then be to deport all Muslims.
We will not receive even one Muslim because this is what we promised. This is why Poland is so safe. This is the reason why we had not even one terrorist attack.
पूरी दुनिया में मुसलमान जलील हो रहा है। आज दाढ़ी वालों को देखकर लोग टेररिस्ट कह रहे हैं। आज मुसलमानों के चेहरों पर दूसरी कौमें थूक रही हैं। कभी सोचा इसकी वजह क्या है? इसकी वजह यह है कि मुसलमान हर दौर में अहले बैत का गद्दार रहा है। जन्नत जाना चाहते हो? 70 हूरों से शादी करना है?
जिस देश की आबादी आधिकारिक रूप से एक बार 30% मुस्लिम हो गई, उस देश में केवल 25 साल के अंदर मुसलमान फिर किसी को भी जीवित नहीं छोड़ते। यह दुनिया का इतिहास है। आप मिस्र को देख लीजिए, आप लेबनान को देख लीजिए, आप सीरिया को देख लीजिए, जॉर्डन को देख लीजिए।
हिंदुओं जागृत हो जाओ, नहीं तो मर जाओ चुल्लू भर पानी में, सुधर जाओ, वरना मुसलमान बना दिए जाओगे, ईसाई बन जाओगे। ज्यादा देर नहीं है आपके पास, समझ लो, वर्तमान स्थिति को समझो, अन्यथा डूबना तय है आपका। जय पारसना, जय मां भारती।